Luke Rockhold, son of a bitch. All right. I don't agree with a single decision that Luke Rockhold has ever made. But I will tell you, the sport is a lot more fun when Luke's around. It really is. So here's the deal. Go back a period of time, okay? Luke is the champion of the world. Fast forward, Luke is no longer the champion of the world. Luke decides he's going to leave 185 pounds. He's going to march himself up to 205 pounds. Now, that was a fascinating experiment for me because Luke's nemesis, Chris Weidman, who was a former champion of the world, also moved up to 205. They both did it at the exact same time. And it was a perfect time because the world was looking for somebody to take on Jon Jones. So these guys, light bulb both goes off. They both go to do the same thing at the same time. And for me as a fan, that was fun. And I was into it. Now, let me make sure I explain this to you in case you forgot the timeline. Luke leaves 185 pounds. He goes up to a weight class he's never been in. After taking a break, he returns against Jan Blachowicz, the best guy in the world. Luke took on what turned out to be the best guy in the world at a weight class he had never done, coming off of a break. And you go, Luke, what are you doing? Right, it's one of these things, but this is how his mind works. So then, Luke goes and takes another break. Changes weight classes again, back down to 85, and steps in there with a guy they call the Terminator. And you're going, Luke, this is a lot to bite off after a meaningful break. Not to mention the shot that you took by a guy who turns out to be the best light heavyweight there was, right? I mean, it's just one of these things where you can't invoke fear into him. And Luke takes some heat online. And I will tell you, I've never really understood it. What, you find him arrogant? He needs to have a level of arrogance. It's self-confidence. He's going to wear almost nothing and then step into a steel cage in front of the world against a trained killer. I mean, not for nothing. I never really understood that. You say whatever you want about Luke Rockhold. That guy has courage. Period. Okay. So Luke goes in there with the guy they call the Terminator. And it's one for the ages. There is no question when this fight is done who the winner is. There was no question who the loser was, which was Luke. And there was nobody in higher demand in the division than Luke Rockhold. He showed such heart. I go back to the word courage. He is exhausted. He has his hands on his knees. He can barely stand. And every moment where there was fighting to do, he was fighting. Every scramble that could be done, he was scrambling. Every bit of oxygen he could suck out of the air. I think they were fighting in Utah, which is relevant. It's a higher elevation. There's some other challenges to it, not to mention it's a super hard opponent. And not to mention, Luke returned down a weight class while older in age, and not to mention he'd been on a break. So then you guys will remember the blood. Right, he starts white. He can't beat Paulo Costa, so he's so angry at him. He starts running the blood on. It's just this fascinating thing. And then what does Luke do? At the height of his popularity, I mean, it's not even a question who the fight of the night is going to. This is arguably a fight of the year, definitely moments of the year. What does he do? He retires. Nothing in this guy's career have I agreed with. And I watched that fight. I was at a movie theater. Was that the same night? Was that the night the head kick heard around the world? Was that just before Leon captured the belt? That's where my mind is at. But I'll share with you, I'm watching this thing on the big screen. And I was so proud of Luke. He was so tired. He's out there with this younger guy, but he's getting beaten up. He's getting bullied, but he would not back down. It was just awesome. He retires. He takes his gloves off. Oh, my goodness. And I remember thinking, okay, give him a moment, right? You don't ever want to judge a guy right in that second. And a retirement's a big thing. And most guys, it doesn't just come to them. They were thinking about it before, maybe even had the speech worked out. So a lot of times it does end up holding up. But we still give him grace in that moment. No, Luke stuck with it. He was retired, and then he comes out today. Might have been last night. I catch at 6 a.m. this morning. And he's in the gym. He does a photo of himself. You know the old expression, a picture is worth 1,000 words. So he does a photo of himself. He's got his fight gear on, which means shorts. He's got his gloves on. And he says it could be an interesting 2023. And it's one of those spots. The UFC is extremely difficult to compete in if you are not a champion or a contender. If you prove through opportunities, through hard matchups, through competition, that you're not one of the two, it's just a hard place to be at. Not to mention for an older fighter, not to mention for a former champion. I think that stuff's really cool. And I know that you guys do too. But we can also acknowledge it. It's just hard to stick around. You could see Overeem, you could see JDS, you could see TJ Dillashaw, just as very recent examples. I don't think that's true for Luke. I think they give him a match. I think he's special. I think he's different. I think that last performance alone, just out of respect, gets him another match. But who would it be against? And if you're not in the champion or contender category, who do you go against? And that's wherein lies the problem. You want to keep some of these outliers, right? You want to keep some of these legends, these Rashad Evans. You want to keep some of these guys around, but it's hard. Who are you going to put them against? And I think that Nick Diaz is in a similar situation. I think the fans love him. The fans want him. His inactivity always puts that question mark there. And I don't plan, by the way, if you guys follow me over here, like I don't plan to put every veteran 85-pounder against Nick. But it's not a bad option. It's an interesting match. You got two guys from California. I don't know how they haven't crossed paths yet. Nick seems to make it clear that he's going to 185. I don't know what Luke's going to do, but it's hard. It's very hard with these breaks. I don't love that Nick keep taking breaks. Nick looked a lot better and did a lot better in his fight with Robbie Lawler than he knew at the time. That fight was a lot more competitive than Nick knew at the time. And I can tell you, for me as a viewer, I brushed that right off. No problem. Nick had been out 5 years, different weight class, shaking some rust off. This is great. Everybody's got a little bit slower start on their return. Let's get a calendar booked here, 3.5, 4 months, get him back in here, and then that didn't happen. So that inactivity is a tough one, unless you can find a guy in a similar situation. I'm just throwing a suggestion at you. But I will tell you, this sport is a lot more fun when Luke Rockhold's in it. You tease him all you want. You be jealous of his nice smile and smooth skin all you want. You can't take that from him. I don't think that you disagree with me.